How's it going, Lindsay? What are you doing today?
I am seeding some spinach.
All right.
So this is our third planting of spinach. This was our first one, and this was our second one a few weeks later, and now today we're doing this one.
Wow. What do the seeds look like on this?
They're just little kind of round things. And I'm putting a couple seeds into each little compartment of this tray. These little compartments are called cells, so I'm putting 2 seeds in each cell. But not all seeds look like this. We have some different types too. You want to see some other ones?
Yeah. What do the other seeds look like?
Well, I picked these because I think they're all pretty cool. First is a seed that you might recognize. Maybe you've taken this in your lunchbox, sliced up. It's a vegetable, it's green.
Is it a cucumber?
It is a cucumber. Nice
Alright.
guess. Okay, this one you might recognize. You might have eaten it at a baseball game or something like that.
That looks like a sunflower seed.
That is a sunflower seed. So these we actually collected from our garden, and now that's what we seed when we want sunflowers in our greenhouse here. And this other seed I just came across, I thought it was pretty cool because it's so big.
Yeah, what's that one?
That is from a giant pumpkin.
You guys grow pumpkins too?
Yeah, pumpkins too. So the pumpkin and the cucumber seed look kind of similar, and they're actually from the same family of plants, so that might be why they look kind of similar. But there are some flower seeds that are all funky shaped.
Now you said these are all plantings of spinach. Why did these ones and these ones look so very different?
Well, this planting is further along, so it's been growing for a while. These have just barely germinated. Germinated is a word to describe when a plant just starts to emerge out of the soil. So what happens is that seed cracks open and all that energy that's in the seed bursts open and the plant starts to grow. And it always has its first 2 leaves, which are called cotyledon, which I kind of like that word, it's kind of cool. The cotyledons usually look really different than the true leaves.
Is that what we're seeing here with these
Exactly.
2 different leaves on here? Because these I recognize as spinach leaves that I might have in my salad, but I haven't put these on my salad before.
Exactly, yeah. After a while, the cotyledons will grow to be this big, so what is now teeny tiny will grow a lot bigger, and eventually they'll just start to turn yellow and they'll just fall off. They're not really the leaves that we typically associate with spinach. We usually see the true leaves and we would recognize spinach that way. And you can see it on these cucumber plants as well. The cotyledons, the first leaves, look really different than the true leaves. And the true leaves will keep growing and looking this way. And just for the first 2 leaves, the cotyledons always look a little different than the other leaves, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, so the cotyledons are just to kind of get the plant started.
Exactly.
And then after that, the next leaves that come in will be what we would see on that plant for the rest of its life, maybe?
Yep, exactly.
All right.
Until it dies. And so, yeah, these plants have been growing, and these are perfect size for planting out into someone's garden. And so they've been growing on the top and underneath the soil line. The roots are growing as well. So actually, if we pop one of these out, we can see kind of what the roots would look like in there. And these are planted into little, it's called a 4-pack because there's 4 cells in them, and these are for a home gardener to use.
Wow.
So if we pull that
It's
out,
fuzzy.
yeah, it's fuzzy. You can see that the roots are just starting to get to the bottom of the pot, and this is kind of perfect for planting because you don't want it to be, sometimes you could pull something out and you'd see just a ton of roots, and that means it might be a little root bound, and that means it needs a bigger pot.
Okay.
So when things are starting to get to that size, we always put them into a bigger pot so they have more room to grow.
It's like a goldfish.
Exactly.
Okay.
Never feed it too much, just a little and not more.
Lindsay, these tomatoes are getting so big, maybe they're getting root bound. What do we do for them?
That's a very good question.
This garden grow. Gonna mulch it deep and low. inch by inch, row by row. Gonna make this garden grow. Gonna mulch it deep and...
Last time on In the Greenhouse.
Why did these ones and these ones look so very different?
Cotyledon, they've been growing on the top. The roots are growing as well. The roots are just starting to get to the bottom of the pot, root bound, and that means it needs a bigger pot. It needs a bigger pot. It needs a bigger pot.
Lindsay, these tomatoes are getting so big, maybe they're getting root bound. What do we do for them?
That's a very good question. It's very important that we are always managing for what our plants need. So we have to be really conscious of if it has enough soil there to really give it all the nutrition and energy that it needs to grow. But the other thing that we have to do is make sure that we have enough space, physical space in our greenhouse to fit all of these plants. So when we first start tomatoes, we start them in a tray like this that actually has 20 little rows. And we grow a lot of different types of tomatoes, so usually each row has a different type of tomato in it. And in each row we can fit about 20 or 25 seeds, which will grow 20 or 25 tomato plants. So if we have 20 tomato plants in each row and we have 20 rows, some of you might be able to calculate how many tomato plants that is. It would be about 400 plants, so we can fit a lot of tomatoes in this little tray. And I should just say that we do a lot of math on the farm. It's really important that we understand how to do multiplication and division so that we can understand how many plants we need and how many plants we have space for. And they have enough soil in this tray for a while, but at some point we have to pot them up. That's what we call it. We say we need to pot up the tomatoes, or we need to transplant the tomatoes. And so then what we might do is move them either into a tray like this that has 50 cells, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 50 little spots in this tray, or into a big tray that has all these individual pots and can fit 18 tomatoes. So we always have to kind of weigh out how much space we have in the greenhouse and what our tomatoes need. So this tray that has 50 tomatoes, if we wanted to put those into the 18 pot trays, it would take 3 trays, whereas this is just 1 tray. So if we have room for 3 trays, we can just put them in the big pots. But sometimes we don't have that much room, so we have to keep them in these 50 trays. So when we're ready to put the tomatoes into a bigger pot, we take the bottom of the tray and we kind of pinch the bottom and squeeze out the cell of the tomato. And there again you can see the roots of the tomato, and this is just perfect. The bottoms of the roots are just starting to reach out to try to find more soil, so we want to put it into a bigger pot. So we take a bigger pot and we make a little hole in it, and then we just put the plant right down in there and kind of smush it in. Make sure we always cover up the root ball, which is the soil that came out of this tray. And when we kind of press down around it, and there you go, we have a tomato. We have to be sure to water it right away. And if it was a really hot sunny day, we would put it under our greenhouse table so that it stays in the shade and just doesn't have a big shock to its system. So now you've seen some seeds, you've seen what it looks like when we seed in a tray, and what those first leaves look like, the cotyledon. And you've also seen what needs to happen when plants become root bound and need a little bit more space when we pot them up or transplant them. So if you have any questions, please let us know, and thank you so much for joining us. We're happy to be here in the greenhouse.
Deep and low, make it fertile ground. Inch by inch, row by row. Please bless these seeds. Inch by inch, row by row. Gonna make this garden grow. Gonna mulch it deep and low.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. We're here in the greenhouse again, and the last time we were in here, we were talking with Lindsay about the plants growing on the top and on the bottom, and we potted them up so they could have some more space. But now that they're in these larger pots, we want to know, what's the next step? Where do they go now?
Yeah, so our options are when they're getting too big for their little pots, we pot them up. When they get too big for their later pots, we're gonna go from here, we're gonna transplant them into the ground. Now these are in their sort of final pots that we've potted them up into. Some of these are gonna go to people's home gardens where they're gonna take them home and plant them and take care of them. And a lot of them are gonna get planted into the field on our farm. For me to feel ready to put these plants into the ground, plant them into the ground, there's just a few things that need to happen. I want to make sure that the soil is fertile. I want to make sure that the spot we are planting into is weed free. And I want to make sure that the soil is relatively loose to at least 6 inches of depth. We're going to carefully sort of encourage these out of their pots. We're just going to kind of wiggle the pot off of there. This is close to a perfect root ball development for me. And then depending on what the root ball looks like, if it's totally encircled with roots, that would be called, it would be a little bit root bound in the pot. And you'd want to just sort of like break it up just a little bit to encourage new root hair development when you put it in. If it's not totally covered in roots, then it can go into the ground right like that. You want to make sure your hole is deep enough to place that whole soil plug down into the ground. And you're basically just going to tamp it in really firmly, and you want to cover the whole top of the soil block. Whenever you do put stuff in, you soak it in really well. That's probably the most important thing. The looser your soil is, the deeper the better. Always when you transplant things, there is some potential for the plants to exhibit a bit of what we call transplant shock. And so what you'll see sometimes is the plants might get a little discolored, they'll start turning a little bit yellow, or they'll start purpling some in the stems, and they don't look particularly healthy, or they don't look as healthy as when you put them in. That would be referred to as transplant shock. There are some things that we can do to alleviate that. One is planting in the right conditions. If you have a hot, sunny, windy day, that is not good conditions for putting plants in. Basically, the roots of these plants would prefer to never see open air and sunlight. So that's just something to keep in consideration. When you start pulling them out of the pots, the best thing to do is to go directly from the pot and into the ground, rather than leaving them in the sun and wind for any period of time. We also give the plants a transplant drench when we're putting them in. So this is just giving them a blast of really good nutrition that's going to boost their health. Just the same way as you might take vitamins, minerals, that sort of thing, supplements, so that when we're putting them into the ground, we know that they're just like, their immunity is at its height, hopefully, and their vitality is just really ready to power through this new transition.
We can help the plants find equilibrium by providing for their nutrition. And our stewardship really does make a difference. Thanks for joining us, and join us again.
Fertile ground, inch by inch, row by row. Please bless these seeds. Inch by inch, row by row. Gonna make this garden grow. Gonna mulch it deep and
Welcome back to Shrewsbury. We got a lot of great questions from students after our last video about greenhouses. So yeah, one of the big questions from students was, how does a greenhouse get and stay warm? And we thought we'd ask Farmer Scott if he can help us answer that.
Yeah, so it's fairly simple actually, the way it works. Typically the sun comes down and hits surfaces and then radiating up into the atmosphere. With a greenhouse, we're taking that same process and we're having the sun come down through those layers of plastic, that clear plastic. It's hitting things inside the greenhouse, warming them up, and then the heat has no place to go. It's kind of stuck within that building envelope of the greenhouse. So that all works great while the sun is shining during the day. Of course, there's another consideration, which is at night, the sun isn't shining through the greenhouse and warming things up in there. So we need to use supplemental energy to keep things warm in the greenhouse. Let's go check that out. So here we are. So for supplemental heat in our greenhouses, in our heated greenhouses, of which we have 2, we use wood heat. So we use wood burning stoves. We used to just use wood, and the problem with that is we would be up stoking the fire at midnight, 3 a.m., 6 a.m., and when we're busy in the spring, it's a pretty tiring sort of routine to get into. When we added the second greenhouse, we also added propane heat. The nice thing about the propane is I can keep it set on a thermostat to whatever I want it to be in here. When the wood stove starts to burn down overnight, this will kick on to keep it warm. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. We can burn fuel that we harvest from right here on the farm, but to not get up, 4 times during the night, we can also use the propane heat.
Oh yeah, I just remembered. One of the students asked why we don't want it to be above 70 degrees in here.
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. So it is okay to go above 70 degrees. We're really shooting for a range between like 65 and 80 degrees in here is perfectly fine for all of the types of plants that we have in here. We actually manage our greenhouses where this one is a bit warmer, and we have another one over here that we manage a fair bit cooler, and we keep that one at about 58 overnight. But on a day like today, it's easy to get a lot warmer than we would like it to be in here. If we close this down, it would get over 100 degrees in here really quickly, and the plants would really shut down doing what they're trying to do. So we have a couple of really simple ways of letting that trapped air out of the greenhouse. Basically, we can open the ends. We have doors on either end of this. We have a ridge vent, which is up high to allow the trapped air out of the peak of the greenhouse. Or in these greenhouses, we're set up so that we can roll these sides all the way up to vent them that way.
Thank you for joining us again, and keep the questions coming. We'd love to hear from you.
Gonna make it fertile ground, inch by inch, row by row. Please bless these seeds I sow. Inch by inch, row by row, gonna make this garden grow, gonna mulch it deep.
Oh, working in the garden always makes me feel hungry. So I think I'm actually gonna forage for something to eat. Now, foraging is when you go outside and you collect some things that you can eat. And what's important when foraging is to make sure that you're only eating things that you know what they are. And I think that's good advice for if you're at the grocery store as well. But today we're gonna forage for dandelions, which are really recognizable, and they're super prevalent. They're all over the place. So that's what we're gonna go for today. Let's see if we can find any here.
These are obviously dandelions, but all these long jagged leaves over here are dandelion greens as well.
Dandelions are fun to pick and pop their tops off. Or wait until they've been pollinated and blow their fuzzy seeds into the wind. But did you know that you can eat them? A garden trowel helps you get them roots and all. So dandelions are great. You can actually eat the blossoms of the dandelion. You can eat the leaves as well. And you can eat the roots. And there's a lot of medicinal home remedy properties in the dandelion as well. So we're gonna do some little recipes to show you some ways that you can prepare different parts of a dandelion.
I noticed some dandelions growing in the greenhouse today, so I harvested them and thought I would make some dandelion fritters by battering them and frying them up. It's really simple. Here are the steps. This is what you'll need. 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, 1/2 tablespoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and we're going to mix all the dry ingredients together and then add 3/4 cup of water. Once we have the batter mixed, you can trim some excess green that you don't want on your dandelion blossoms, and we'll get oil ready on the stove. You want the oil to be deep enough to fry the dandelion blossoms in, and add them gently so you don't splash the oil. Cook them until they're a nice golden brown. These are super great with a homemade dipping sauce. And there are tons of things you can do with dandelions. You can use the leaves in soups or in pestos. You can roast the roots and make a drink out of the root. And of course, dandelion fritters. Join us again for some more recipes, and we'll see you soon.
Make it fertile ground, inch by inch, row by row. Please bless these seeds. Inch by inch, row by row. Gonna make this garden grow. Gonna mulch it deep and
Hello, welcome to a new video series put together by SAGE, Shrewsbury Agricultural Education and Arts Foundation. My name is Steven. We're going to be visiting some farms and learning about what farmers are doing here in Shrewsbury.
I'm Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Scott. This is Remy. He likes carrots. And this is Ella.
And our family runs a farm called Alchemy Gardens, and we grow vegetables, and we also grow a lot of plants for home gardeners. Okay, so why do we grow vegetables on our farm? We grow vegetables because we all need food to eat, and we need that food so that we have energy. So the sun up in the sky has so much energy, and the plants on our farm capture that energy. So some of those plants we eat the leaves, like kale or spinach. Some of the plants we eat the roots, like carrots or beets. And some of the plants we eat the fruit, like a watermelon or a tomato. And when we eat that food, we have the energy basically from the sun and from those plants in our bodies. And that helps us to be able to do all the things we love to do, like running or dancing or jumping, or even just for our brains to work the way we need them to think through math problems and spelling and all those sorts of things.
Ooh. It is chilly out there. Snow's flying here, April 17th in Shrewsbury. But luckily, it is nice and warm here in our greenhouse. So our season here, our growing season, is pretty short in Vermont. It's really only, we can have frosts as late as towards the end of May and as early as the beginning of September. So it gives us just a few months of really good growing conditions. But a greenhouse like this creates a perfect environment for all these baby plants that we're growing. So we get a lot of things started for people in their home gardens, and then we grow a lot of things that we'll plant out on our farm to grow produce to be sold later in the summer. Greenhouses are a really simple technology. It's basically, you've got this thin plastic covering that allows the light to come through, but it captures that light as heat inside, and it keeps it in here. So even if it's, it's probably 35 degrees out, if the sun came out, even for 5 minutes, and we didn't open the doors here, it could get up to 90 degrees. If we left it closed for 20 minutes, it could be over 100 degrees in here. So we have to be careful that it doesn't get too hot. But basically, we try to keep it around 70 degrees in here, and all these baby plants will thrive in that sort of condition here in the early spring.
Wow, there are so many things to learn about farming here in Shrewsbury. I can't wait to learn more. I hope you'll join us next time.